Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. I'm Ryan, and I've got a story to tell, one that's been gnawing at me for a while now. It's about someone I thought I knew through and through, someone I trusted with my whole future, someone I was set to spend my life with. Her name was Sophie. We'd been together for years, and I was sure she was my forever. But in one brutal, eye-opening moment, everything I believed about her and about myself fell apart. That moment didn't just show me who she really was. It made me face what I'd been dodging for way too long. Before I get into the chaos of how it all went down, though, I want to take you back to the beginning. Back when things felt right, when I genuinely thought we were on the same page. Because, trust me, there was a time when it was good, or at least I convinced myself it was. Sophie and I didn't rush into anything. We'd built our relationship slowly, step by step. I'd been there for her through every high and low, long before she scored her big job at a top-tier marketing firm in Seattle. Back when she was still figuring things out, bouncing between temp gigs and late-night worries, I was the one in her corner. I'd stay up with her, polishing her cover letters, running practice interviews, or just letting her ramble about another thanks but no thanks email. I believed in her, even when she couldn't see her own worth. And I never made her feel like she wasn't enough. All the while, I was chasing my own passion. Music. It wasn't just a hobby, it was my heart, my hustle, my life. I'd scrape by to buy my first real guitar, taught myself until my hands ached, and turned open mic nights into steady gigs at legit spots around town. My songs even started popping up on local radio. I wasn't just getting by, I was making something of myself, and I was proud of what I carved out from scratch. Early on, Sophie seemed proud of me too. I can still hear how she'd hype me up. "Ryan's got this unreal talent," she'd say, beaming as she played my latest track for friends. "His music's going somewhere, just wait." She'd gush about the time one of my songs hit a small indie station, acting like it was her win too. I thought she saw me, really saw me, a guy who'd turned his dream into something solid. I had no clue that would ever change. But it did, bit by bit, in ways I didn't clock at first. When Sophie started her new job, I knew it was intense. Long days, big campaigns, a whole new crowd she was trying to fit into. I figured some stress was par for the course. She'd come home drained, and I'd listen, thinking I was being the good guy. But then her take on my work shifted. It wasn't obvious, not right away, just tiny digs I let slide. The first time it sank in, we were at this cozy Thai spot, tossing around wedding ideas. I was pumped, talking about a new amp I'd been saving for to level up my live shows. She let out this tired sigh and said, "Maybe you should look into something with a real paycheck. Weddings cost a fortune, you know." She smiled like it was a throwaway line, a little jab. I brushed it off, told myself she was just wiped out. Then, a few weeks later, we were at the mall when she spotted a coworker. She waved, but didn't call me over. When she came back, she mumbled, "I didn't know how to introduce you." Didn't want to get into the whole musician thing. I stood there, stunned, tried to play it off, convincing myself she didn't mean it that way. But the third time, that one landed. We were at home, chatting, when she said out of nowhere, "Music's nice and all, but it's not exactly a career, is it?" No laugh, no wink, just her real thoughts, slipped out like it was nothing. That's when it hit me. She wasn't joking. To her, what I'd fought for, what I lived for, was some cute little pastime, not a real path. I didn't push back then. I made excuses instead. This was Sophie, the woman I'd loved for years, the one who'd always back me up. Maybe she was just stressed, I reasoned. Maybe I was overthinking it. So I let it go, told myself it wasn't a big deal. Looking back, though, that was my first misstep. That was the first crack I ignored, the first hint I should have taken seriously. Because those offhand remarks, they weren't small. They were the start of something bigger, something that'd unravel everything I thought we were. Things kept rolling along after those early warning signs, but the cracks were there if I'd bothered to look. I didn't, though. I kept telling myself Sophie's comments were just offhand, that she didn't really mean them the way they sounded. We were still planning a life together. After all, the wedding was inching closer, and I was still the guy showing up for her, celebrating her wins at the marketing firm while grinding away at my own music. But the shift in her attitude wasn't going away. It was growing, and I was about to see it in full color. The moment that really started to wake me up came when Sophie invited me to her company's annual gala. It was a big deal, her first time bringing me as her plus one to something this fancy. I was excited, honestly. I figured it'd be a chance for us to feel like a team again, like we were building something together. The event was at this swanky venue downtown, a sleek, glass-walled ballroom with views of the Seattle skyline. Everyone there oozed that polished corporate vibe. Tailored suits, sharp dresses, all carrying themselves with this effortless confidence. They talked about clients, bonuses, and corner offices like it was second nature. I didn't feel out of place exactly. I love my life, my music, but I could sense the gap between their world and mine. Still, I wasn't there to blend in with them. I was there for Sophie. She introduced me to a handful of her coworkers, maybe 5 or 6 people, all sipping cocktails and swapping stories about their latest projects. I stood next to her, nodding along as they rattled off names of big brands they were pitching. It was fine, until one of them, a guy in a sharp gray suit, turned to me. "So, Ryan, what do you do?" he asked. His tone was friendly enough, but I could feel the weight of expectation behind it. Maybe he thought I was in advertising too, or some tech startup, something that matched the room. Before I could even open my mouth, Sophie jumped in. She let out this little laugh, sharp, almost mocking, and said, "Oh, Ryan? He basically just strums a guitar for tips." She swirled her drink as she said it, grinning like she'd just dropped the cleverest line of the night. The group erupted in laughter, loud and unrestrained, like she'd nailed a stand-up routine. A couple of them shot each other knowing looks, smirking as if they'd just figured me out. One woman even tilted her head and said, "Oh, that's adorable," like I was some kid with a lemonade stand. I stood there, the sound of their chuckles closing in around me, and something clicked. This wasn't a slip or a bad joke gone wrong. This was Sophie, unfiltered, showing me exactly how she saw me. Not as a musician with a career, not as someone who'd built something real, but as a guy who strummed a guitar for tips. A punchline. It wasn't just the words. It was everything they carried. All those subtle digs from before, the hesitations when people asked about my work, the way she'd started brushing off my gigs like they were a phase. It crashed over me like a wave. She wasn't proud of me. She wasn't even okay with me. To her, what I did, what I was, didn't measure up. It wasn't respectable, not in her shiny new world of power lunches and expense accounts. I felt my grip tighten around my glass, my chest going heavy. For the first time, I saw her clearly, and it hurt like hell. But it also lit something in me. I wasn't going to let this slide, not this time. I took a slow breath, set my drink down on the nearest table, and looked her dead in the eye. "If you don't respect what I do, Sophie, then you don't respect me," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not going to spend my life with someone who thinks I'm a joke." The room went quiet, like someone hit mute. I could feel eyes darting between us, waiting for her to fire back. Sophie just stared at me, her mouth parting slightly before twisting into this nervous little laugh, like she could still play it off. But I wasn't playing. I reached for her hand, slid the engagement ring off her finger, and slipped it into my pocket. A gasp or two rippled through the crowd. Someone by the bar muttered, "Whoa," but I didn't care. I didn't need their reactions. I turned and walked out, steps calm and deliberate, leaving that room and everything it stood for behind. I didn't glance back at her face. I didn't need to. For the first time in too long, I knew exactly where I stood, and it wasn't next to someone who looked down on me. That night, as I walked into the cool Seattle air, I felt this strange mix of relief and ache. Relief because I'd finally said what I should have said months ago. Ache because it was over, years of us, gone in a heartbeat. But I wasn't second-guessing myself. Not yet. I'd chosen me, and that felt right, even if it was messy. The days after that night at the gala were quiet, too quiet. I walked out on Sophie, left her standing there in front of her fancy coworkers, and she didn't reach out. Not a text, not a call, nothing. I wasn't shocked, though. Sophie had always been too stubborn to admit when she'd screwed up, too obsessed with keeping her image spotless. Me walking away like that, taking the ring and leaving her to deal with the whispers? That had to sting her pride more than anything else. She wasn't the one being laughed at anymore. I was the one who'd flipped the script, and for someone who cared so much about how she looked to others, that was unforgivable. I didn't sit around waiting for her to come crawling back, either. I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't. At least, not right away. For a while, I just kept moving, playing gigs, writing new songs, trying to shake the weight of it all. I catch myself replaying that moment in the ballroom, her laugh echoing in my head, but I didn't let it pull me under. Then, weeks later, out of the blue, my phone lit up with her name. It was a long message, the kind that takes time to write, but feels rehearsed. I've been thinking about what happened. It started. I didn't mean it the way it came out. You know, I respect you. I was just trying to be funny. I didn't realize how it sounded. Can we talk? I read it, then read it again, letting the words settle. If she'd sent this the next day, maybe I'd have bought it. Maybe I could have chalked it up to a dumb mistake and a quick apology. But weeks of silence? Weeks of acting like I didn't exist? Nah, this wasn't remorse. This was Sophie realizing the fallout. Friends asking about the wedding that wasn't happening, coworkers gossiping about the guy who ditched her mid-party. She wasn't sorry she'd hurt me. She was sorry it made her look bad. I wasn't mad, though, not anymore. I just felt this calm clarity I hadn't had in a long time. Sitting there with her message glowing on my screen, I saw it all laid out. Sophie had never really been proud of me. She'd put up with my music, sure, but she'd never valued it, or me, for what it was. She wanted a partner who fit her new life, someone she could parade around at work without a second thought, someone with a title that didn't need a follow-up explanation. That wasn't me, and it never had been. So I typed back, keeping it short and straight. Thanks for the message, Sophie. I wish you the best. I mean that. But we're done. Let's both move on. No venom, no fight, just the end. I hit send, and that was it. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. That silence was her answer. It was mine too. That was the moment I knew I deserved more, not just from her, but from life. I deserved someone who didn't just tolerate my passion, but got it. Someone who'd never smirk at what lit me up, whether we were alone or in a crowd. And once that clicked, I couldn't stay still. Seattle had been home forever, but it felt too small now, too tied to a version of me that didn't fit anymore. I'd always dreamed of pushing my music further, taking it somewhere bigger, riskier. Portland was calling, vibrant, artsy, a place where I could stretch my wings. It wasn't cheap, and it scared the hell out of me. But for the first time in years, I was choosing myself, no compromises. So I packed up my gear, my guitar, my life, and left. No looking back. Portland hit me like a jolt of electricity. I said yes to everything. Bar gigs, street festivals, even a random collab with a local producer. I hustled harder than ever, booking late-night sets and crashing on friends' couches when I had to. But it didn't feel like a grind. It felt like freedom. I was building something that was mine, something no one could dismiss. Months flew by, and I wasn't just scraping by. I was gaining traction. People started recognizing my name, my sound. Then one morning, I opened my email and nearly dropped my coffee. One of my songs, a raw, acoustic track I'd poured my soul into, had been shortlisted for a National Music Award. I blinked at the screen, rereading it to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Out of thousands of entries, mine had made the cut. It wasn't just a fluke, it was proof. Proof I'd been right to bet on myself, even when Sophie hadn't. I didn't know if she'd ever hear about it, and I didn't care. That chapter was closed. What mattered was that I was finally surrounded by people who saw my music for what it was, art, not some quirky side hustle. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Portland became my proving ground. After walking away from Sophie in that life in Seattle, I threw myself into my music like never before. Every gig, every late-night writing session, every chance to play, it was fuel. I wasn't just running from the past. I was running towards something I could feel taking shape. The city had this pulse, gritty, alive, full of people who didn't just hear my songs, but felt them. I'd play at dive bars one night, then open for bigger acts at packed venues the next. My name started buzzing in small circles, then bigger ones. I wasn't rich, not by a long shot, but I was making it work, and it felt good, damn good, to build something no one could tear down with a smirk or a laugh. That email about the award shortlist was still sinking in when the real bombshell hit. A few weeks later, I got the update. I'd won. My song, the one I'd written in the raw aftermath of that gala night, had taken first place in a national competition. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. It wasn't disbelief. I'd always known I had it in me, but validation. Out of thousands of submissions from artists all over the country, mine stood out. I didn't jump up or shout. I just leaned back in my chair, letting it wash over me. This wasn't luck. This was me, showing up for myself when no one else did. The award came with a small cash prize, a slot at a major festival, and a write-up in a respected music mag suddenly. I wasn't just some guy with a guitar. I was someone people wanted to hear. I wondered, for a fleeting second, if Sophie ever saw the news. Maybe it crossed her feed, or maybe a mutual friend mentioned it. Did she pause, rethink how things ended? Did she kick herself for letting me go? Or did? Name equals Grok says she probably just shrugged and moved on, telling herself she'd been right all along, that I'd never amount to much. Honestly, I didn't care either way. Her opinion didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I'd gained since walking out of that ballroom. It wasn't just the award or the gigs or the recognition. It was the people I'd found, friends, collaborators, fans, who saw my music for what it was, real, raw, worth something. And then there was Mia. I met her at a gig a few months after moving to Portland. She wasn't some groupie or a scene chaser, just a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet way about her, sipping a beer in the back of the room. She didn't rush up to me after the set, but I caught her watching, really listening. Later at the bar, she said, "That last song, it hit hard. You got something." No gushing, no fluff, just straight-up respect. We talked for hours that night, about music, sure, but also about life, dreams, the stuff that actually matters. She was a graphic designer, scrappy and self-made, who'd clawed her way up from nothing. She got it. The hustle, the passion, the way you pour yourself into something because it's who you are. She never once treated my music like a cute little hobby. She'd ask about my process, my influences, like it was serious business, because to her it was... Mia didn't just admire what I did. She believed in it. She'd show up to my shows, not to be seen, but to hear me play. Once, after a late-night set, she said, "You're not just good, Ryan. You're good. Don't let anyone tell you different." It wasn't flattery. It was faith. And over time, that faith turned into something more. We'd spend nights sketching out ideas. Her with her designs, me with my chords, two people building things side by side. No judgment, no pressure. She never made me feel small, never laughed at what I loved. With her, I didn't have to prove my worth. She already saw it. Looking back, I realized Sophie taught me something I'll never forget. Respect isn't optional. It's the foundation. When someone keeps chipping away at what you love, even if they smile while they do it, it's not a joke. It's a signal. I ignored it too long, told myself I was overreacting, that Sophie didn't mean it. But she did. And staying would have meant shrinking myself to fit her version of me. Walking away was hard. Dumping an engagement in front of a room full of suits isn't exactly a fairy tale ending, but I've never regretted it. Choosing myself over a life of feeling less than was the best damn move I ever made. Life in Portland kept moving, and so did I. Winning that award wasn't the end. It was a launch pad. Gigs turned into tours, small venues into sold-out crowds. My music started hitting playlists, getting streams I never imagined. I wasn't some overnight superstar, but I was living it. My dream, my way, no apologies. Every note I played, every lyric I wrote, felt like a middle finger to the doubts Sophie had planted, but also a nod to the faith I'd kept in myself. I'd built something real, something mine, and no one could take that away. Mia was there through it all, not as a cheerleader, but as a partner. She'd sit with me after shows, dissecting what worked, what didn't, her honesty as sharp as her pride in me. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, built on a kind of respect I hadn't known I was missing until I found it. I don't think about Sophie much anymore. She's a footnote now, a lesson learned. If she ever caught wind of my success, the festival slots, the magazine spreads, the way my name started carrying weight, I doubt it fazed her. She probably scrolled past it, convinced herself she'd dodged a bullet with the guitar guy. And that's fine. I don't need her to see me win. The victory isn't in proving her wrong. It's in knowing I didn't let her define me. Walking out of that gala, ring in my pocket, wasn't just about ending things with her. It was about starting something with myself. I'd spent too long ignoring the signs, letting her jab slide because I loved her, because I thought love meant swallowing the hurt. But it doesn't. Love lifts you up. It doesn't cut you down. That's the biggest thing I took from it all. You can't settle for someone who belittles what makes you you. Sophie's jokes weren't harmless. They were her truth, spilling out in front of her coworkers in quiet moments at home. Every time she rolled her eyes at my music, every time she hesitated to call it career, she was telling me how she saw me. Small, insignificant, not enough. I told myself it was nothing, that I was too sensitive, that she'd come around. But people don't change how they see you unless they want to, and she never did. Staying would have meant proving my worth to someone who'd already made up her mind. I walked away because losing myself wasn't an option. Not for her, not for anyone. It's funny looking back. Ending an engagement in a room full of strangers wasn't how I picture my story going. I didn't plan to be the guy who drops a mic and leaves, but I don't regret it. Not for a second. That night, I chose my self-respect over a future that would have dimmed me. And trust me, it wasn't easy. There were days after when I second-guessed myself, wondered if I'd overreacted. But then I'd pick up my guitar, play a riff, and remember, this is me. This is what I love. And no one gets to make me feel less for it. Moving to Portland, betting on myself, finding Mia, it all came from that one choice. I didn't just survive it. I thrived because of it. So here's my 2 cents from someone who's been there. If you're with someone who keeps downplaying what sets your soul on fire, whether they laugh it off or couch it as advice, listen, not just to them, but to what it's doing to you. Ask yourself, do I want to spend my life justifying who I am to someone who won't get it? Because you don't have to. The right person won't need convincing. They'll see your worth from the jump. Mia did. She saw me, guitar and all, and never once made me feel like I had to be more than I was. That's what I deserve, what we all do. Someone who doesn't just tolerate your dreams, but celebrates them. Who stands beside you, not above you. That's my story, messy, real mine. I'm curious about yours now. Ever dealt with someone who couldn't see you for you? What would you have done in my shoes, stayed, left, something else? Drop your thoughts below. I read everyone. And if this hit you somewhere deep, give it a nod. It means more than you know. Life's too short to let anyone dim your light. Keep chasing what's yours.